It could shock anyone following the Madlaga Commission to discover that a single contradiction buried deep in sworn testimony might be the thread that unravels an entire policing hierarchy. One moment of hesitation, one instruction delivered behind a closed door, and suddenly the story around a politically sensitive murder case begins to wobble, raising the question no one wanted to ask. Was a senior figure like MKhwanazi involved in helping a murder suspect escape the full weight of the law? And that is where this investigation pulls you in. Because as the inquiry continues, each witness adds a new piece to a puzzle that is no longer just about one killing. It's about influence. It's about decisions that should have been transparent but instead happened in shadows. It's about a sequence of events that, once laid out, forces you to wonder whether justice was ever meant to run its natural course. Before this story settles, it exposes the one revelation that stops even seasoned investigators cold. Someone may have deliberately steered the case away from the truth. Before diving deeper, a challenge emerges. What lasts longer, secrecy built on power or truth built on persistence? Viewers who have watched cover-ups collapse in other scandals know that silence always has an expiry date. And here, as we trace each step, you will see how remarkably predictable patterns start to form. Patterns that don't appear unless something far bigger is happening behind the scenes. The first layer of this narrative lands with a question that investigators themselves whispered. Was the earliest suspicious decision simply human error, or was it the moment the cover-up began? Every major case has a point where the path splits, one route leading to transparency, the other to concealment. In this case, the earliest choice made by those in authority raised eyebrows long before anyone dared speak openly. When a murder suspect receives subtle protection at a procedural level, the story always tips into dangerous territory. As more documents surfaced, one buried detail came alive again. A strange omission. A phone call that should have been logged but wasn't. A routine verification that wasn't done. At first glance, it looked like a common administrative slip. But in the context of high-level police involvement, things that look small often signal something enormous underneath. The commission found itself circling this single point repeatedly, because the absence of an action sometimes tells you more than the presence of one. Imagine this moment. A murder case freshly opened, evidence still warm on the table, and the officers responsible for handling it hesitating before making their next move. Time is everything in the first hours of an investigation. Delay changes outcomes. Delay changes narratives. Delay gives someone, somewhere, room to maneuver. As the commission replayed the timeline, this pause became more unsettling than any missing report. It felt like a door quietly closing on the truth. Then came a witness whose voice carried the weight of lived experience. He said there was a moment when the entire environment stopped feeling like policing. The energy in the room shifted. The decision-makers seemed more focused on managing perceptions than on hunting the killer. When seasoned officers feel that, it rarely means the investigation is evolving naturally. It means an external force is shaping it in ways no procedure manual would approve. What surfaced next was a startling observation. Institutions can twist reality the moment they fear scandal more than justice. You could hear it between the lines of testimony. Officers were cautious. Language became diplomatic. Explanations sounded too rehearsed. In inquiries like this, the tone of answers often reveals more than the words themselves. When individuals start protecting reputations instead of facts, the trajectory is already compromised. This tension reached a new level when senior officers contradicted their own paperwork. In law enforcement, documentation is evidence. It is the backbone of credibility. Yet here, key figures struggled to reconcile their testimonies with what they themselves had signed. No one forgets a murder file. No one misremembers chain of custody details, especially not high-ranking officials. And yet the contradictions stood bold and unshakable in front of the commission. Two separate timelines finally collided, and they refused to match. That was the moment observers leaned forward, because when timelines disagree, truth has been edited somewhere. The commission examined phone records, logs, handwritten notes, and a surprising pattern emerged. The timing benefited only one person, the suspect. Coincidence rarely arranges events this neatly. Picture an investigator walking into a briefing room expecting clarity, only to find confusion so heavy that even simple questions can't find air. That was the description offered when officers described meetings held in the early stages. The tone was off, instructions were unclear, tasks were rearranged without explanation. Situations like that build a fog around facts, and fog is exactly where a cover-up thrives. Before the second half begins, a moment to breathe. The deeper we go, the more the inquiry exposes the invisible structures shaping this case. And if this unfolds at the pace it has so far, the next testimony may shift the entire foundation of the Commission's understanding. For viewers following this dissection of truth and influence, staying engaged becomes essential, because revelations rarely arrive politely, they erupt. Returning to the unraveling narrative, a former officer stepped forward describing a directive that, in his own words, should never have come from that level. For him, that moment signaled the beginning of something unnatural. Directives in policing follow hierarchy, but they also follow logic. When a senior figure issues an instruction that bypasses both, officers notice. And the Commission noticed too. Corruption never announces itself with alarms. It slides in quietly, disguised as routine. The Commission probed simple steps, sign-offs, approvals, transfers, and found subtle fingerprints of influence. Small actions placed in strategic positions can shift the path of an entire murder investigation. When those actions all point in the direction of protecting someone, suspicion transforms into something sharper. Then the Commission faced a question that could tilt everything. Did one key meeting determine the direction of the entire case? Attendees gave conflicting accounts. Some insisted it was a normal briefing. Others hinted at pressure, even intimidation. Meetings like these shape outcomes, not through dramatic commands, but through unspoken cues. Tone, posture, phrasing. These elements guide actions as strongly as explicit orders. Unexpectedly, two independent testimonies, given days apart, aligned perfectly on one suspicious moment. Neither witness knew the other's words. Neither had reason to support the other. Yet they described the same irregular instruction with eerie accuracy. When separate streams converge seamlessly, inquiries pay attention, because consistency is the enemy of lies. Another scenario emerged. A detective caught between protocol and pressure, forced to navigate a path that made no procedural sense. His description painted a familiar picture, the feeling of being directed toward an outcome rather than being allowed to discover it. Investigators know when they're being nudged, and nudges in murder cases always lead somewhere uncomfortable. A whistleblower then recalled what happened after raising early concerns. Meetings grew colder. Colleagues became distant. Requests for clarification were dismissed. He said the atmosphere changed overnight, as though someone had quietly marked him as a problem. In policing structures, isolation is often the first sign that a truth threatens powerful interests. Lessons from long-standing inquiries whisper the same idea. When silence settles over inconsistency, something bigger is at play. No one needed to say it outright. The Commission felt it. Witness after witness seemed to circle the same hidden center without naming it directly. Sometimes the absence of accusation reveals the presence of fear. And then came the discovery that startled even hardened analysts. A crucial report vanished for months. No explanation, no chain of custody record. It simply resurfaced later as though nothing had happened. Documents don't disappear without reason. Someone had purpose, motive, and opportunity to move it. That reality cast a long shadow over the entire narrative. Contradictions began to reveal a pattern. Individually, they could be dismissed. Together, they formed a map. A map pointing toward influence, interference, and deliberate direction. The Commission didn't need a confession. The evidence was speaking for itself, piece by piece forming the architecture of a concealed truth. Imagine the final hearing moment, one question posed calmly, landing like a strike. A senior figure shifts in his seat. His answer is measured, careful, almost rehearsed. Everyone in the room feels the tension coil. Because sometimes the truth doesn't require volume, it demands precision. And it was clear to everyone present that something in that answer had been engineered to protect, not to reveal. As this journey edges toward its own conclusion, the inquiry stands at a threshold. The implications stretch far beyond one murder case, touching the integrity of command structures, the ethics of leadership, and the uneasy space where policing meets politics. What emerges now could redefine accountability in ways that echo long after the Commission closes its doors.